Welcome to Anything But Ordinary, the podcast that explores the extraordinary world behind the world, the unordinary people and businesses that create the extraordinary bubble around high-profile lives. I am Zoe Jackson, and in each episode I sit down with inspiring individuals, from founders and creators to pioneers and disruptors, who are redefining success and carving out their own paths in business and in life. We dive into the personal challenges, triumphs and turning points that make their journeys anything but ordinary. This show is your reminder that success isn't one size fits all, and life really is anything but ordinary. Carla, welcome to Anything But Ordinary. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I really appreciate the invitation. I know it's going to be a fun one.
It's definitely going to be a fun one. Definitely perhaps something that I hadn't considered, having someone with your career and your profession, you know, in terms of a business sense on before. But I am so excited. I was looking at your LinkedIn and something really stuck out to me. It was that line, which is, it's not just sex, it's being unapologetically you from bedroom to boardroom. And I was like, okay, wow. Like, how does sex therapist, relationship therapist, how does that then translate into like a person that is running a business, you know, a professional working person's life? And how can that have such an influence in terms of a business person, I guess, because I think we think about it very singular in terms of just outside of work and not really how it can affect the day to day. So I'm really interested to deep dive into all of this. First of all, I guess we could start with how does one get into or decide or wake up and think, I know what I'm going to do in my life. I'm going to become a sex therapist.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah. So, this is a question that gets asked like really frequently. Let me just say, so I grew up Catholic.
Right.
My background is Southern Italian heritage. So, really reserved. And in my 20s, had you said to me that I would be doing this, I would have looked at you with absolute like horror probably. And one of the reasons being is, in my 20s, I was very much like the good girl. I had it indoctrinated in me that to be, a woman of worthiness in the world, it meant finding a husband, having children, because that was my value as a woman. And a lot of the things that I did, how I behaved sexually, was with the focus of, I need to be good so that a man will marry me. So, just to give you a little bit of an idea, because I think people, they see me now, they see my vibrancy and they see how I speak and think, oh, well, it's okay for her because, look at her. But actually my own journey itself has been one of like unraveling. So, but the actual sort of turning point, let's say, of me taking this path, I was a stay-at-home mum. With my two boys, and I had really, really bad chronic anxiety. And it was starting to really impact the world, my internal world, the world around me, my children, my husband at the time. And I went on a women's retreat. And absolutely terrified about going. The anxiety was so intense that I was worried about losing my passport. I needed 2 different types of credit cards because what if I lose one of them? And oh my God, it's in Morocco. Do they have seatbelts that work? And like I worried about every last thing. And this retreat basically opened me up to the idea of actually I can choose the life that I want. And it was the start of being able to take responsibility for myself, for my own actions, for my own thoughts as well. And I went on I suppose, a healing journey over the course of a year, really looking at my trauma and reading loads of books around trauma, and life started to feel quite good. My anxiety went, and I thought, oh gosh, what if life could feel really amazing? And at the time I was like, I can have orgasms, sex is good, but what if it could be like really good? Like, I had this desire for it to feel different. And, the relationship with my husband at the time was really improving, but it felt like things could be better. And again, I didn't know how. And also because of this journey that I'd been from with anxiety, it was like, I also wanted to support other women. I knew a lot of other mothers that were struggling. And I was like, I've done it. You know, I'd really like to support other people. I didn't want to do anything talk related like counselling because I had been through that for myself. And for me personally, it just kept me stuck in the past, just ruminating over and over on the things. I was like, I want to do something that's going to take people forward, like create actionable steps to move them forward. And I considered doing coaching. And so somebody suggested, you know, because I was bringing these two elements, you know, one, a potential career, and the other one, like my own personal life, why don't you do this training, this certification here that's at Sex, Love and Relationship? And I was like, oh, that could be really interesting. I can take all the sex and relationship stuff for my own personal development, and then all of the skills around coaching, I can support, you know, mums with anxiety. And then the first 3 to 4 months were a huge deep dive into my own sexual oppression, let's say, like patriarchal oppression. So from outside myself, my own internal suppression of my sexuality. My relationship patterns, looking at attachment theory, and it was a huge self-discovery. And it was also at that point as well that my husband at the time and we decided to go non-monogamous. So
wow, okay. Whoosh, I wasn't expecting that one. Okay.
So we had like over the course of a few months, a conversation around like what non-monogamy would look like for us, you know, talked about jealousy, how that might affect our relationship. So we had really deep conversations around that. And I just started, you know, doing the work myself and noticed how I started feeling. I was like, actually, I want to help people with this. Like, I want to help people with their sex lives and their relationships because it's just, I feel lit up. I feel alive. I feel really good. I'm, you know, healing from the anxiety made me had like a baseline of, I know I can cope in the world.
Yes, yeah.
And then it's like, actually, life can be fucking great, you know? And that was the journey that I started to go on.
That is amazing. I think, I mean, I don't even know where to start here. But with your husband then, so he was totally on board when you said to him, actually, before the, you know, not being monogamous, but actually you decided to explore this journey of learning about how to become a sex therapist and to take this course. And you told him, and he was absolutely on board.
Yeah, so he was massively supportive because I was starting to realize that I was finding it very difficult having, you know, one identity of only being a mother. Like I needed some other sense of purpose in my life as well. And so, yeah, for me, having that sense of purpose and not giving everything and self-abandoning really, and I did it from a place of martyrdom. So, you know, I chose everything because I wanted everyone to say, look at Carla, she's sacrificing herself for her children. How good is it? You know, how good she is. And it came from very much a wounded place. I, you know, very much desired other people to acknowledge that in me. You know, it was very much from a victim consciousness place. And I see so many women even now, you know, and this is the whole thing of like, we can choose to be in the situation with love, or if we're doing it from a place of victim consciousness, like I'm self-sacrificing, you must appreciate me because I'm doing this for everybody else and I'm abandoning myself. Like that's not fully choosing, you know, that is, that's asking people outside of themselves to adapt, to show up for you. And so that was also a realization in itself that I wasn't actually fully choosing motherhood in the way that I was saying I was. I was doing it from a place of, needing that external validation.
Yeah, the validation side. And that then goes back, like you said, to childhood, I guess, wounds, like trauma. And it's interesting, actually, you were brought up as a Catholic. So I have a very mixed background when it comes to the religions that I was brought up in when I was growing up. So my mother was Greek Orthodox, and then sent me to a Catholic school, sent me to a standard school, and then became a Jehovah's Witness. And so actually, as a child, so from about 7 until I just decided that actually I could say for myself I didn't want to be part of it until I was about 14, like that was very much put upon me. And I think that definitely influence a lot of how I put myself out into the world. Like, as you said, the wanting to be a good person and the acknowledgement for that, or the validation I felt like I had to get from being this great person that I'm supposed to be, but at the same time not feeling completely at peace with it and rebelling as well. So it's a strange thing, but I can see how you get to a point, especially after you've had children, especially when then you're put into that pigeon box of just being a mother, to go, actually, what does make me happy? What's going to make my soul feel good? And are there things from my past that have caused me to get here?
I'm curious, so if you're open to sharing, what was your relationship to sex and sexuality when you were younger?
I think I was totally rebellious,
Okay.
to be honest. I think for a long time I thought I was just going to get married. Actually, the person I thought I was going to get married to, who was one of my best friends within the Jehovah's Witness religion, he turned out to be gay. And all my friends knew he was gay, except for me, who I thought that we were going to get married and have children and bring them up to be like Jehovah's Witnesses within our congregation and, do the right thing. And actually, maybe that was part of it when I realised actually he wasn't straight.
Yeah. I'm wondering also, as you're
Yeah.
saying that, if everybody else knew that he was gay and you didn't.
So lots of my friends who were called worldly, so who were outside of the religion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering if there was a part of you that unconsciously knew that he was gay and that's why you chose him.
Maybe, yeah.
Because quite often, in relationships and, the way that we tend to move through the world, especially before we do any sort of self-development or self-awareness work, we unconsciously choose people that are going to, repeat the patterns or the ideas or the stories that we have about ourselves or the world around us. And so, I'm really curious.
I mean,
wondering...
that is definitely a deep conversation,
Yeah.
I think, considering I'm now separated from the father of my children in a new relationship. I was only asking someone about this the other day. How do you not repeat the same things? But okay, I will park that one for the moment. But yeah, no, definitely my relationship with sex and understanding sex and sex education came from a very kind of sterile place,
shame as well.
Yeah, a lot of shame associated with sex. So then for me, totally, I flipped the coin and I was just rebellious, and perhaps built up lots of unhealthy relationships during my time until, well, who knows? It can be continued. But anyway, I think, it's a very interesting subject, and you can cover so much within, your profession and the stuff that you do cover. You can do cover all kinds of, like you say, attachment theory, look into how, people relate to sex, their relationships. But one of the things that I'm really interested in is how that relates in, like we said at the beginning, the boardroom. So, high achievers, entrepreneurs, people that are very successful within their business. I mean, one would assume then they've got it all sorted.
I love that. So this is the thing. So we move through the world always looking at other people, and especially now that we have social media, and we can, portray our lives in a particular way. And I really try on my own personal social media, to show all the really great things and the learnings that I have, but also to be really honest, yes, I am the expert, but also I'm a human being as well. And, I am still learning, still making mistakes and still working through my own things. And then when it comes to leaders, because, sat in my office on Zoom, working with clients, I get to see the real deep sort of parts of people that, quite often they don't show with other people. Sometimes they're even their own partners. And what can happen is for a lot of people that are successful, particularly ones that have built up their own success, is quite often, what I have noticed with the people that I've worked with, it's very much like building and creating a mask, you're protecting yourself. And, these people, I'm thinking of a few different clients that I've worked with as examples, they have these masks. They show up in a way that to the rest of the world, looks like they've got it all together. But quite often deep down inside, there's this part of them that feels really afraid because there's this authentic part that would like to be seen, that would like to be acknowledged. They know that the people surrounding them are with them for this mask that they have. And they're really concerned that if I drop it, who's going to be, who will want to be my friend, or who will respect me. And so it's a really difficult time, I think, for the world that we live in right now, because, you know, we were talking just before the podcast started that there's, you know, people that have come up, you know, old money and new money. So you've got people that have passed through like the generations, and leadership has moved through from, you know, father to son. And then you have people that have created that, you know, oftentimes from nothing or very little. And so the different faces of that can feel very, very different. And, you know, trusting the people around you and knowing that they're there for you can be quite a vulnerable journey, you know. Unraveling yourself, removing those masks can feel, excuse me, vulnerable, because you don't know if you're going to be rejected and you don't know where life is going to take you next. But once you begin to remove those masks, what you tend to find is that the people that really connect with you and who you are, like, are so much stronger to you and with you than the people that don't resonate with you. And the thing is, and this has also been my own personal journey, we quite often as people pleasers, and, you know, a lot of people that are in positions of power or success are quite often people pleasers. They're not necessarily doing things to make other people happy as such, but they're doing things to be liked.
I mean, do you know what? Everything you're saying is so powerful. Actually, it really resonates with me, because I think that when you say like being a people pleaser and putting on a mask as an entrepreneur, as someone that runs my own business, I feel like it's almost, in a weird way, a very lonely place as well. As you say, there is that vulnerability of like letting down the mask, or not being able to please, not being able to keep everyone happy.
And this was exactly the point that I was going to come back to, was that the thing is, even though we're functioning people pleasing, it doesn't matter what we do, no matter how much we self-abandon, there are still going to be people in our lives that disagree with what we do, that, you know, always have something negative to say.
Oh, there always is, yeah.
So
there's
always going to be those people, no matter how much we self-abandon. So the option that you have is self-abandon and upset some people, or be really true to who you are, call in your people, and you'll still get the people that don't like you anyway, but you're always going to have them. And so, you know, when you can show up so much more authentically, removing that mask, pulling those people in, you and yourself feel so much better because you're being true to who you are. And that's, you know, comes back to the whole, like, the relationship element, the sexuality element, like tuning into, you know, what lights you up, what turns you on sexually, the type of relationship that you want, because, you know, things like non-monogamy, polyamory are becoming so much more talked about and so much more in the forefront, like having the option to choose the relationship that you want. I don't think, you know, we used to have this idea of like, you know, you grow up, you go to college, university, you meet somebody.
It's the Disney story, yes. Of course,
exactly. And so you follow this particular path, and like, if you you get married, and then you have the children, you get the house, and then, you know, at a certain point you go, oh my God, this is not what I expected, and I got the job that I should have got. You know, my parents are really happy with what I'm doing, but actually, you know, this life is sucking my soul. And, you know, the beauty is now that so many people are doing it differently. Like, you don't need to follow that path.
No.
And
I think, and I think, you know, that everything you've said, like I said just a moment ago, is so powerful and will resonate with not just myself, but so many other people listening, whether they are, you know, an entrepreneur or they're at home with their children and thinking there must be something more. Who am I? What is my authentic self? But what is really good, as you said, now is that on so many, we've got so much access to so much media, whether that's Instagram or it's TikTok or YouTube or podcasts, where people are talking about things that would never be spoken about before. Absolutely not. However, I would say that I think it's still one of those things that, you know, being someone working within business, let's say you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, like, how does that then relate to like having a good sex life or being in touch with your sexuality empower you in a business capacity?
Right. So a person who is connected to their sexuality from a place of self-compassion, from a place of self-love. So what that means is they have a healthy relationship to their own genitals. They have a healthy relationship to their own sexual desires. They have a healthy relationship with their own partner if they have one. They are able to have empathy for them, compassion for them. When you're able to show up like that, you're generally connected to your body and how you feel and what your emotions are. And you're able to be fully present and not get pulled out into any drama that might be happening. You're a lot more aware of the thoughts that come into your head and the stories that you have. So, healing and working on your sexuality and your relationships brings you down to self-awareness that is very difficult to get just from surface level interactions. And the reason being is, our sexuality and our relationships are sort of if you want to look at it from a spiritual perspective, like the sense of safety and our sexuality are in the root and the sacral chakra, okay? Or if you want to look at it the root and sacral chakra, so the lower chakras, okay? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then if you want to look at it from a Maslow's hierarchy of needs perspective, you've got that safety and that security, and then before you can have that, then you get like the belonging and the love and all of the other different elements of it. And so, whether people listening tend to be on more of the spiritual side or, they like things related to anthropology or social studies, whatever it might be, whichever one that you look at, those elements, once you work on those, are creating the foundation for everything else that upon which that you can build. Mm-hmm. And so these are like the deepest parts of ourselves. And as we've already said from our own, that we've shared with our own religious upbringings, it's also the place that we hold the most shame. And shame is like the lowest vibrational emotion that we have. And the thing is with shame, what that does is it makes us hide and it makes us retract. And when you can have an intimate relationship with shame, that doesn't make you hide, but you can hold yourself in with your shame and love yourself through that and be with it, like nobody can pull you in any direction. Because if you think about it, the only time you can be manipulated to do something if somebody shames you for it. Yeah. And so as a leader, if you can turn around and say and acknowledge, yes, I have made a mistake because I've learned to be with my shame. Yes, I can, this was the thing that I said that was wrong, and I can love myself through that mistake that I made, through the shame. Like, you can't be toppled. You can't, like I said, it's that foundational element. It's so much more difficult to be moved.
Yeah. I mean, I had never really thought about it like this at all before, because, you will go online or all of us that, well, for me anyway, let's say for me, I perhaps might sometimes gravitate towards like self-help book, or like, let's look at some manifestation or visualization. What do I want out of my life? Rather than perhaps, interestingly, looking at what you said is the shame element, which can be holding you back, because they are, having this sense of shame, which of course a lot of people do connect with, like sex and shame, as we've said, especially like if you've had a religious upbringing, or just in terms of like generational perhaps as well. It can be hard to think about it that way. And if you do have that sense of shame, as you just said, that can then have a negative impact when you're making decision making across the board. Never thought about it like that at all. Now I can see how it could be so relevant.
And it's also, so the biological purpose of shame, if you go back to like times when we were tribes people, all emotions are a means of understanding, our role and our relationship to other human beings. So anger is there for us to be able to place boundaries, to protect our territory, and shame, as an example, what that does is it ensures that we make decisions that are going to ensure that we belong within the tribe. So evolutionarily speaking, it is a useful emotion to have. The problem is with shame, when we don't acknowledge and accept for the fact that it's there and we try and hide it, that's when it becomes in a way more dangerous because we're unconsciously trying to avoid anybody knowing that thing that we did. Because shame is more about who we are as a person. Guilt is like, I did something bad, I feel bad about it. Shame is, I did something bad, I'm a bad person. And so when you have that relationship to yourself where you feel like deep down in your depths that you're a bad person, that's when you can get pulled and manipulated in different directions. And then coming back to the relationship element, the tribal element, it means as well, like shame is useful because if we do something to upset somebody and we experience that shame, it's like, this is a sign here, hang on, I've hurt somebody. Like instead of, a lot of people's reactions when they experience shame, they do something to hurt somebody. The first thing that we want to do is like protect ourselves because, well, I'm not really a bad person. I didn't intend to do that. And this is why apologies are so difficult. Because whenever we hurt people, most of the time, we're not doing it from a place of intentionally hurting. We're doing it from by accident.
Yeah.
And so when you apologize, it feels like I'm having to admit that I'm a bad person. And that's where the shame comes from, because it's like, it's like, okay, I don't want to acknowledge that I'm feeling like a bad person. So what I'll do is I won't apologize and I'll project it back onto you. And,
defensive, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And so it's like, okay, yeah, but if you hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have behaved in the way that I did. Whereas if we can realize that we are good people that sometimes make mistakes and hurt other people, and it's like, okay, I've done something wrong, I've hurt you, I acknowledge that and I take responsibility for that, like that is where the connection is built. And this is another reason why being able to be with that shame is just so important.
So interesting. It really, really is. I guess so when people come to you, like they come to you, Carla, I've been recommended to come and see you. They haven't deep dived that much. They haven't really thought about this element of shame. What they're coming to you, I would say, probably is to do, not even if they've done phenomenally well within their business world, and they've got a great career and everything's going swimmingly there. It's more from the personal side, like something's going wrong sexually for them.
Yeah.
And so that would be the first thing they would come to you for.
Yeah, and so people tend to come, so like men, it'll be performance anxiety. I don't like to use the term erectile dysfunction because there generally isn't a dysfunction there. There's not actually a problem. It tends to be in their head.
It's in their head. Stress related.
Psychosomatic. Not so much stress. No? Like I was saying before, a lot of men put masks up. And the thing is, it's a really difficult time for men. Women.
That's really interesting. You would say it's such a difficult time for men because I don't think as a woman and all the messaging that's out on social media, people would say, poor men. They would say, look, female empowerment, women are changing things, really hard on women, trying to have careers, trying to be mums, trying to do everything. But actually, I guess it can be a tricky time to navigate for a man where historically they've had to play one role.
Exactly. And so women now don't need a man. And so for men, and especially, I'm in my 40s, men of our age, so much so that, they don't, it's really difficult for them because it's like, well, I grew up being told that I needed to be a provider or, you got men going to war. Those were the sort of roles of men. Women were the homemakers and nurturers. And it's like, the woman out-earns me, women are doing better, more women at university and higher education. And it's like, so for men, it's a really difficult time because it's like, what am I here for? What's my purpose? And quite often when I'm working with couples, especially, when the woman's doing particularly well, it's like, learning how to create space for him to be able to provide because there is that desire for men to provide. And if he's not in the position to do that financially, then for his sense of purpose in the relationship, he does need to provide something else somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so, and then, one of the problems is now like a lot of women as they get like move into, relationships, because they can provide all the physical things for themselves, what most women are wanting in a relationship is to be met emotionally.
Yeah.
And because a lot of men, especially now, I'm in my 40s, a lot of men were told, don't cry when they were children, don't cry, be a man, Don't show your feelings, do it by yourself. And then all of a sudden, like 30, 40 years later, they're being told that, women want them to be able to listen to them.
I want you to cry with us and watch a silly film and do the pink jobs as well.
Yeah.
And that is, I guess, a bizarre kind of turnaround on things, but yeah.
And so for them, all of a sudden, like the way that they have been taught to be for decades, all of a sudden they're being asked not to do it. And, I work with and collaborate with men who are men's coaches, and a lot of their messaging to the men, like nearly everything is like how to become more emotional and how to feel. And the thing is, for men that learn how to feel, it does make them better leaders because they're able to connect at a deeper level. Because when you feel, so feeling are like the sensations that are in your body. And so, when you can feel the anger in your body, when you can connect to the sadness, when you have that connection to your own body, because we are animals first, we can then feel the bodies of other people. We can feel the shift of their own discomfort, and this is why, exactly. And this is why so many men often make a mistake and misread situations with women, which can lead to things like sexual harassment, saying the wrong thing, because they're not connected to to themselves and their own bodies. They can't feel what the body of a woman or anyone else is saying to them. And so coming back into the body as a leader is like so much more important, because it's that ability to feel for yourself that brings you back into presence, groundedness. You're able to have this awareness of what's going on internally so that you can choose how you want to adapt, but also how you're responding to the people around you.
I mean, I guess someone, like we said, would come to you thinking it's just a physical problem. I'm sure you have that all the time. Like, can you just sort it out? It's going to take like a couple of sessions and off I go.
But it's so much more deep-rooted. So it's like, going back to like the thing with regards to performance anxiety, very often that's like, those sorts of men tend to be wearing masks, how they're showing up, they're not being true to themselves, they're not, showing themselves authentically. Things like delayed ejaculation with the men that I have worked with. So delayed ejaculation means that they struggle to ejaculate. Quite often is because they're not able to surrender, they're not able to let go, to feel seen. Premature ejaculation tends to be a lot more because they have a bit more of a nervous disposition, so they're a bit worried. They're hypervigilant, people that tend to worry and stress a lot, so they're not able to be into like the rest and digest part of their nervous system, which is what's required to be able to maintain an erection. And it's the fight-flight response within the nervous system that makes you ejaculate. So if you're quite tense and nervous, then you're going to ejaculate sooner than you want to. And then for women, like the thing with the two biggest things that I see with women is women that aren't able to orgasm with their partner. And again, that's like letting go and surrender.
But isn't that a very common thing? I mean, a lot of women would say, like still now, even with everything that's out there and all the extra things that you can buy to help a situation, that they have never or do struggle.
Yeah. And so there's something called the orgasm gap. And so depending on the research that you look at, like, so women that are able to orgasm with a partner is somewhere between 30 to 60%, which, is really low. For men, I can't remember now the statistics. I think it's around 80 or 90%, something like that. So it's considerably higher, and that's what's considered the orgasm gap. And there are lots and lots of different factors for that. Some factors are that, the misinformation and miseducation around women and women's bodies and what they require. Women tend to need a lot more warming up before they can get to orgasm. And there was research done actually in Brazil looking at women who fake orgasms, because the problem is, and this is the thing that I always say to my female clients,
but that always goes back to shame, right? Because I guess a woman would feel slightly embarrassed that they haven't been able to reach the same place as their partner has, and embarrassed to kind of admit that their partner hasn't helped.
The research that was done in Brazil was showing that it had I can't remember now, like 30 or 40 different things that the women could tick. The general theme was that they didn't want to lose their partner, or they didn't want to upset his feelings, or they didn't want him to cheat. So it's like that whole thing that I was talking about before, self-abandoning. These
Yes.
women weren't speaking up for themselves. They weren't saying a little bit to the left, a bit more to the right, up, down. Because the thing is with women's bodies, if you're not using contraception and you have a menstrual cycle, what you want and how you feel and what you want with regards to sex is going to change through the menstrual cycle. That's totally normal. There'll be times in your menstrual cycle when you want more sex, times when you want less, times when you need it like this, and times when you need it like that. And so communication is really, really important. And, there's two parts of this when it comes to communication. Some is like some women just don't communicate. Yeah. And then some women are in relationships with men where when they do communicate, it gets shut down, or the man gets upset and he's like, I'm trying my hardest, or it worked for my last partner, you're being really difficult. And the thing, when a woman comes to me and she says that, he does this to me and it's not working, and he's done it with all of his other partners and they've not had a problem. And I say, I'm really sorry to say this, but it's very likely all of his previous partners were faking their orgasms, because we're all so different and different women need different things. And if he has had such a high success rate previously, and now that you're speaking up for yourself, he's not got that success, it's very likely that the other women have been faking it. And, and I say to women, if you love and respect other women, please don't fake your orgasms, because the next person that he moves on to, you're ruining it for her.
Yeah.
And it's, and it's so much around that. And which comes back to, the second thing. So it's women not having orgasms. And the other issue that I get is women with painful sex. And the thing is, women that don't have good boundaries and don't speak up for themselves, if they don't do that verbally, their body's going to do it for them. So vaginismus, which is painful sex. Yeah. So that's when the vagina sort of tightens. That is often because the women aren't communicating what they want. Penetration's happening sooner than they actually want it to. They're not quite ready. There's not been, enough engagement for them to get aroused. I don't like to use the word foreplay because that makes it sound like penetration is the main event. And, quite often for women, 80% of women...
Well, penetration also is just male-female, apart from unless you use, so...
Yeah, so there are lesbians that do penetration as well, but they do it with toys or strap-ons or so but only 20% of women can orgasm from penetration alone, so
20%.
And so if you bear that in mind, for a woman to reach orgasm, she's going to need a lot of attention on her clitoris, for her to even get aroused, let's say, to really, really build that arousal towards orgasm. And so, again, this is coming back to it. Communication is key. And so returning to the whole shame thing that we were talking about, if you're not able to be with the shame which you experience when somebody says to you, hey, can you go a little bit to the left and a bit more pressure or a bit less pressure? If you can't sit with the discomfort of somebody asking for something from you, you're not meeting their needs. And if you can't sit with the discomfort and the embarrassment of, oh, I'm asking for what I want. I'm a good girl, though, I've been taught not to ask for what I want. I need to sit there quietly and just take it because I don't want to upset him. I don't want to make him feel bad.
And will he also feel bad of that person, of you, as a female asking that, gosh, she's asking me to do X, Y, and Z, what kind of person is she? How many partners has she had?
Yeah, well, the thing is, and this is a thing that I, always say to women, your self-pleasure practice is really important. How can you communicate what you like and what you don't like if you've not touched your own body? And again, a lot of women don't have a regular, supportive self-pleasure practice because it comes back to the element of shame, And even for men, there's a lot of shame around a self-pleasure practice as well, because you've got a lot of men that use porn. So there's a lot of information and a lot of fear around the use of porn. And also, men's relationship to their bodies is very, very jokey. If men touch themselves, as women, a lot of women feel that it's really icky. If a man self-pleasures, a lot of people think a lot of women say, well, why does he need to do that? Am I not enough? They take it really, really personally. But then our relationship to women's self-pleasuring is really different. That's so okay.
Different. Yeah, it's so different. I mean, it is an absolute minefield. And like I said earlier, there's so many different areas you can go into. Basically, well, I'm not going to summarize it and say basically having great sex, being able to orgasm and feeling comfortable with shame is going to make you a better person in your workplace. But I guess that could be like an overall brief summary, basically. Could make you a better boss. Could it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because you've learnt the communication skills, you've learnt the patience, you've learnt to really listen, to tune in, because good sex requires good presence and listening to another person's body. So going back to the whole feeling thing again, you know, if you're able to be with what's coming up for yourself, be really present with the other person, you then take those skills and you can apply them into work and into your leadership roles as well. Yeah. And it's being able to listen and have difficult and uncomfortable conversations, you know, and people in leadership roles need to have those uncomfortable conversations with people, and how you approach it with compassion, with empathy. You know, a good leader isn't somebody that necessarily tells people what to do all the time. They're listening, they're taking and gathering information, then following their own wisdom, you know, of the way that then, you know, to take the company or to take the organization next. You know, those are the skills. And it's just exactly the same, like, you know, leadership at home, whether you're a woman or a man, leading in your own sort of like kingdom or queendom is, listening to what's going on around you, listening to your own intuition and then following that.
So power, you've said power is magnetic. So that power is magnetic.
So, so with regards to that, so talking about power, so I like to use sort of the archetypes of like queen and king around that.
Yeah,
and so,
I love that.
Yeah, so power, we have quite an uncomfortable relationship with power. So when people think power, we tend to think of it in quite a negative way, because over the centuries and millennia, the way that power has been, you know, misused. And power is really interesting. And one of the most interesting ways to explore power is through things like BDSM, where you have a domination and a submission. So you have a dominant and a submissive. So you really get to explore like what it means to tap into your own sense of power and what it means to allow yourself to submit willingly to another person. Because true submission can only happen when you're in your own sense of power. Because when you trust yourself fully to speak up for your own boundaries and what you want and what you don't want, can you allow yourself to submit to somebody? Because you can then trust the other person as well. You're making a judgment that the person that's dominating you is somebody that you can trust, that you know that if you call out a safe word and this needs to stop, you trust yourself to be able to call that word and you trust them to listen. And so it's one of the most powerful ways to understand how connected to your own power you are. And like domination itself, you know, a lot of people, when they think, if they think of like BDSM and they think of domination, they think of somebody who's like hitting another person. But domination. Well,
I just think about, you know, Mr. Grey.
Yeah.
That's how not naive I am, but that's kind of like the baseline, I guess.
But true power is being able to fully see another human being and really recognize and witness who they are. And submission is being allowed to be seen, to be fully seen and accepted. And so, power isn't about using force. No. It's not about like pushing. It's about putting somebody else in a position where they feel they can relax underneath you. Wow. That's true power.
That's true power. And that is, again, a whole nother topic. Like, you could have a whole podcast on that. And I'd be like, okay, tell me more. That is, wow. One of the things I definitely wanted to ask you, and I guess because, you know, we, on the surface, when someone looks like at your LinkedIn or your profile or looks at a sex therapist, I kind of think, initially you'd think it's just for, like we said, like sorting out your relationship because you've got an issue with sex, but you do kind of speak about using your sexuality as power, as we've just touched upon. As a woman, can that be misconceived as like pretty privilege? Because I would say I'm a confident woman. I would say that I walk into many events and many meetings, and I work in a world which is still very male dominated. And I would say, I wouldn't consciously say that I would be using pretty privilege or my sexuality, and maybe I'm confusing the two here, which I will let you come back at me on. But I would say it definitely being a female that is confident in how I present, and I'm not a timid person, and being able to have conversations and be around kind of certain banter, perhaps, and present a certain way has probably opened some doors for me in a weird way. I mean, I still walk into a room and men will talk to me sometimes inappropriately because they think I'm a female, and that's okay. And really, she must be quite dumb or whatever, or she's not as astute as we are because we're men. But also it has definitely opened other doors because I have been invited to things that perhaps, I don't know, if I didn't present in a certain way, I would not be. What's your view?
So I am going to use the temptress archetype here to explain like my feelings and my thoughts around this. So the temptress archetype is one that's playful and sensual. And so when you say sexuality, it's really difficult to say like, yeah, show up sexually in the workplace, because that's not appropriate. Like, that is absolutely that is not what I am encouraging at all.
Yeah.
When I say to women about being connected to their sexuality, it's more about like when you're confident in all aspects of yourself, you feel and move differently. And so if we connect to the temptress archetype, so she's playful, she's flirty. And when I mean flirty, I don't mean, someone's flirting with a man to get his attention. Flirty in the sense of flirting with life and having fun and being playful and just and because with that's where the magnetism comes. Mm-hmm. And then sensuality in the sense of, again, it's not about being sexual, but it's about like that softness, that connection to your creative essence as a woman. Those are the the elements, the traits that attract people. And, it's being really mindful of not going into the shadowy parts of the temptress. And, the shadowy parts are manipulation, so rather than being playful, she's manipulating. Rather than being sensual, she's being sexual and, being inappropriate to get people's attention. She's taking it outwards. Whereas the temptress is a lot more sort of within herself and inviting people. Mm-hmm. It's more of an invitation rather than the queen, where she's looking out. This is where the power is. With the queen, she's looking at her queendom, or the king's looking at his kingdom, looking outwards and, understanding what's happening around, being able to make decisions, trusting their intuition and then following through with it. Whereas the temptress is like so focused on herself, how she feels, her own sense of pleasure. And I don't mean pleasure necessarily as sexual, but just like how much time are you spending during the day enjoying, your coffee, like I always have every day, coffee and chocolate. And that's like my time to just connect to my senses, slow down. I know I didn't get the full opportunity just before we came onto the podcast to fully do that in the way that I do, but it's like, that's the sensuality that we're looking to connect to. And that is what becomes magnetic. Mm-hmm. And then when you talk about things like pretty privilege, I think that's like,
something completely separate.
Yeah.
Something completely separate.
Yeah, because the thing is, the in-person training that I did I did my certification, and then I did an element of it that was in person in Costa Rica. And there was a whole variety of women of all ages in their 20s. I think the eldest ones were like up into their 60s. And, we have this idea that someone who is sexy, has probably got like hair weaves, has probably got Botox, has got like, we have this idea she's probably wearing
like a glamour model or Instagram, that type of
and so
influencer.
They're going to be like super skinny and all of this stuff. And like there were women there who had what Instagram would consider the perfect body shape. They were very attractive, but they still hadn't embodied that sexiness. And then there was a few women there that were like, reasonably big women, and just the way that they moved, just like ooze sexiness, but not from an outward place, like I was saying
not
before,
not
from the
from a
shadowy
provocative place.
No, but
it's
like
from an inner confidence place.
yeah, and it's
I've
just
definitely met people like that.
yeah, and it feels different. And so is it pretty privilege? Yes, there may be an element of if you're pretty, you may get a door open to you, but like I think what we're looking for is leave the aesthetic prettiness, because yes, on a piece of paper or initially on a social media photo, that might create something. But when you meet someone in person, like the pretty lady that stood there, dolled up to the nines, who's just really static and deep down lacks so much self-confidence.
Yeah.
And then there's the other woman who's like bigger, but just is taking up space, who just is like in her body, sensual, fun. She's going to attract more people.
Yeah, no, definitely true. Absolutely. Interesting. Okay. So also I wanted to kind of shift gear a bit. Just because it's just something I was thinking about being a mum, and I know you're a mum of 2 boys, you mentioned. Do you feel that there needs to be more education around this? And how do you talk to your children about it? I mean, how old are your boys?
So mine are 11 and...
Okay, so right on that peak of hormones, they're in it,
Yeah, my youngest is going to be 18.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, actually. So because of the work that I do, I have like in my office, in my drawer, I've got, and normally, if I do a podcast that's on Zoom, I just pull the things out of the drawer and show it. So maybe I should have brought my toolkit with me today.
Yes.
Next time you have me on, Zoe.
Yeah, next time. Well, we'll deep dive into that side next time.
So I've got like, well, I suppose the dildos in a way that are shaped like that are penis shaped. I've got one that's like a floppy penis and then one that's an erect penis, and they've seen them, and when I talk to them about cleaning their penis in the bath, I've explained, pull the foreskin back and give a good clean around. So, at home we tend to be quite open talking about bodies. And in fact, literally just the other day, my 11-year-old, so I have a little altar at home where I meditate. Mm-hmm. And I went to Glastonbury, and there's this art gallery in Glastonbury, and it has leaves, and these leaves are in the shape of vulvas. So someone's obviously had their vulva cast, and then it's been shaped into a leaf. And I have this on my altar.
I love this. Okay.
I can send you a photo if you like.
God. Okay.
So, yeah. So, and the reason that I have that is like to on my altar, it's like coming back to the essence of who I am as a woman. And so, my youngest asked a question about the vulva, and it's like, is that your vulva, mummy? I was like, no, it's not, but it is quite similar, except this bit here is a bit different, and that bit there's a bit different. But other than that, it's a bit different. Well, are all vulvas different? And I said yes, and I share a resource with the women that I work with because the issue, let's say, of having a vulva is you can't see other women, so you don't know what's normal or what isn't, and what's common and what isn't.
Unless you're a gynecologist who sees everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So most women don't know, and I have a link to, it's an Australian organisation, and they've got, it's called the Labia Library, or the Labia Gallery or something along those lines. And I said to them, that they're all really, really different. And I took them onto this gallery, which is for educational purposes. And we went through and we had a look at how they're all like really different. Like, these are the outer lips, these are the inner lips, look at how these, this lady, you can't see her inner lips, and this one you can see. And, and we went through and we talked about them. And then, I said, and men's penises are all different. I said, like, your penises are different. And then they like, oh yeah, look at yours, it's like this and mine's like that. And so we have quite an open discussion. And my youngest made some like funny comments about how the vulvas looked, and I said, that's okay to say that in that moment, but like it's really important, because people can feel uncomfortable about their bodies, not to ever say something like that to somebody, because they might feel upset or embarrassed. So it was a really good opportunity to have that conversation. And I know from the schools, when they've done PHSE, that the teachers have had really good feedback, that they're really confident about talking about these things.
Well, I'm sure they know so much more than any of the other children in the class. They wouldn't kind of have that conversation like normally, like with their mother, I guess, because we're still not all that open. Whereas I feel that there is a bit of, there is a huge gap there still when it comes to sex education at school, because then the next thing they're doing is watching porn and thinking that is like kind of normal, and then not really understanding, everyone's body's different, and the body shaming side of thing, and, being comfortable with their own bodily parts.
And I can't remember now the exact statistic, but something like, a huge proportion of children start seeing their first like snippets of porn, not necessarily on purpose, but by accident, from like the age 8, and by 11 it's like really quite common. My 11-year-old doesn't have a phone, and we don't have a TV, and like screen time's quite limited just because of the type of parents that we are. But yeah, and so if the thing is, what people don't realize is if you don't have these conversations with your children, they're going to get the information elsewhere.
Yeah.
And like, and the thing is, it's really difficult for me with the work that I do, because I experience a lot of judgment. I'm talking about sex, I'm sexualizing everything.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult, because it's like I need to educate my children, understanding at what point do I educate them on certain things, with them being too young. When they bring questions, I'm like, okay, this is the time to look at it and explore it and discuss it. That's the invitation. But even for myself as a parent, I think more so because of the work that I do, and there's an element of fear of judgment that I might get, that I'm trying to sexualize my children too young, that it's difficult knowing where to have the conversations and where not. And so, also being a woman, and I have 2 boys, I educate them a lot more on the women and the female bodies. And then, their dad, very fortunately, he's also very, very open-minded. And he's, really great at having conversations with them about things and inviting questions and stuff. And so, we have chosen that he has more of the conversations around the men type stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's going to feel more comfortable for them to do that, to have those men conversations. And especially for young boys, women have an element of initiation into womanhood through their periods. It's like you get your period and you feel like you become a woman.
No one talks to the boys, no.
No, and so boys don't have like an initiation into manhood. So they're just like boys, and then all of a sudden they're expected to be men, and there's no like specific time for that. And so something that, I've been like looking at recently is how can my boys have more male role models around them, because their dad and I are now separated.
Yeah.
And our living situation is quite unusual. So I live with the boys all the time. We share the responsibility of them 50-50. So I'm always at home with them. When I have them, their dad is with his partner in their house. And then when he has the boys, he comes back into the house and does, and supports them and does the parenting then. So we have quite an unusual living arrangement from that, but it works really well for the kids because they're not moving from one house to the next, they're staying in the same house.
Because I think it's like nesting, but except for your, is that what it's called?
I don't know if there is a name for it. So maybe you know more than.
Wow, yeah.
And so so the issue being is when I have them at the weekends and their dad isn't around, they're craving more male connection now. And so, what I do is I have my male friends, and it's like, okay, we'll go and hang out with my male friends so that they've got more like boy time together, because, as a mum, I can't give them everything that they need. They do need that masculine interaction, that male interaction, because it's different, Men will encourage them to take more risks. Yourself as a mother, it's like they start climbing the tree and you're like,
get down, don't do that.
Yeah.
Wear a helmet. All those things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas like men are like, yeah, go on, do it, go for it. And it's a completely different, and they need that, they need to be able to take those risks, and they need the men to sort of lead them and to be able to come back to the mother that's going to be nurturing. So it's about having both of those.
That
roles.
balance, amazing. Well, I definitely think there is a space in the education system for like more education in this type of way, in a very much more open way, and discussing things from more of a sexual point of view rather than just like the anatomy, yeah. The anatomy point of view, that is needed definitely for boys and for girls, but I think for boys.
And also pleasure, because the sex education is so much around like, don't get pregnant, STIs.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we connect to pleasure, connection, those are the elements of sex that we're actually drawn to. You know, those are the things underneath the surface that we're actually looking for and craving. And so it's like, why don't we speak more to those?
Yeah.
Why don't we speak more to the pleasure elements of sex and to the connection?
Well, I'm definitely be chatting to you after, because I need to figure out how I'm going to talk to my son. He's 10, and I'm like, oh, because it doesn't, it's not comfortable. It doesn't sit comfortably with me, but it's good to get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's been amazing to have you on, Carla. What I would love to ask you actually is kind of a closing thing. I love to have like a bit of advice or something that you have taken on board yourself and applied within your life, that has made, I mean, you obviously from an extraordinary career, it's not very ordinary at all. So just in terms of like advice or something you followed in life that has been extraordinary or unordinary.
So the advice I would have is learning how to have self-compassion. So, you know, for the mistakes that you make, for the times that you get angry, the times that you get upset, for the shame, because the closer that you can connect to and have compassion for yourself, the more that you can have compassion for other people as well and the mistakes that they make. And I'm not saying it's that when you have compassion for other people, you let your boundaries go and you allow, bad behavior in inverted commas, but like you're not taking it personally. Yeah. So when somebody misbehaves, that you have compassion for the parts of them, their own like inner child or whatever it might be that's showing up in that moment that's like, you know, come online because of fear, because sadness, whatever emotion that it is, and you can have compassion for that person and how they're showing up. As well as maintaining your boundaries. So I would say those are the key elements, because if you take that, you can apply it to everything. Yeah. From bedroom to boardroom.
No, I love that. I love that. And that is the most, actually, that is the most unique advice. Everything else I've had, they're always fantastic, but everything has been very much kind of leaning into fear. And that's kind of, which is an amazing piece of advice. But having more compassion is such a good piece of advice to take away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Anything But Ordinary. I hope the conversation gave you a little inspiration, maybe a new perspective, or just reminded you there's no such thing as a straight path when it comes to success. If you love what you heard, it would mean the world if you could follow, subscribe, or leave a little review. It really helps us keep sharing these incredible stories. And if you want to see more behind the scenes or get in touch, all the info you need is in the show notes. Until next time, keep being curious, keep challenging the ordinary, and remember, the most interesting lives rarely follow the rules.